I always use the word data. And why? Because D for dry or off dry or sweet. This is dry. A for acidity. So where the acidity is with medium minus, medium plus, and so on and so forth. The acidity here is medium to medium plus. Then the T for tannin. Obviously for white wine it won't really work, but for red wine it's there. So don't forget to mention it. The tannins. How are the tannins? And the last of the letters is A for alcohol. Where is that wine stands when it comes to alcohol? Hi, my name is Chris Delalonde. I am a master sommelier, and today I'm going to show you few tips on how to approach the blind tasting for the exam. But more importantly, in general, how to approach a blind tasting as to develop your skill and eventually and potentially discover what the wine is in your glass, and why do you like it, why you don't like it, why the wine is in balance or not. But more importantly, the little elements of it that makes it what it is as its quality, and why this will become part of your wine list or not. Potentially. So I've got here two sets of glasses, and the reason why is because as you prepare the master sommelier, for example, play with different glassware in order to actually set your nose and your palate skill, as every glasses will develop differently, will develop the wine differently, but also will deliver the wines on your tongue slightly differently. So it's interesting to not set your views and your skills on only one type of glass, because, well, you never know what could happen. Normally, the glassware are pretty standard. They are Riedel Tempranillos, but you never know. I usually use a term pretty straightforward. It's from north to south. So what does that mean? I use my eyes, then my nose, and then my palate. Well, that should be the kind of standard approach. So first of all, I'm going to look and then try to basically have an idea of what the wines in front of me looks like. So it's definitely a deep color with a ruby rim and some element of alcohol. So you've got all that glycerin here, what they call the legs, coming on the wall, and these walls are slightly stained. So what do I get from these informations? Well, obviously it's either a deep colored grape variety, an extracted deep color red grape variety, a solar vintage, or a combination of everything. The alcohol, the legs, the glycerin gives me this the idea that, again, with the color taint, that is definitely a solar vintage / young vintage. Because again, in the core and the rim, I don't see any evolution. It's basically deep purple core with a purple rim. So to me, again, I translate that by youth. What else can I say? Well, I want to go on to the core of the product. So I've got my first nose. That's first glimpse of fruit character that already set me in a direction. Then I twist a little bit, I put some hair into it, I break down all the ethanols, and I release as much flavor profile as possible. And the intensity of the wine has now changed. Also, some elements that I didn't pick up on the first nose comes to life and comes to the fore. So the first aspect to me now is the sort of red fruit character, not black, very red, very liquor, very concentrated, and also an element of greenness, maybe a bit of menthol and a bit of sage. You could also derivate as something a bit minty, or at least green in a sense. And then now the black fruit develop. Then now you've got a sort of layering. You got much more depth on the fruit, but also the spices come through. The cinnamon, potentially a bit of tar, maybe a bit of chocolate. And to me, this is because the wines are potentially being oak aged, or I've seen some oak in its aging process, in order to sort of give the wine a certain structure, style, longevity, but also because potentially it's something that's quite aristocratic, if I may use as an expression, and therefore the winemaker behind the label is trying to establish the wine at a level. So without going too much in depth here, you could tell that it's a good quality / very good quality wine already in that glass of wine, because that sort of composure and also the element of aging that has been added to it. It doesn't mean it's completely in balance. We find that on the palate entirely, but the nose already gives you a distinction of where you could be, because of the cassis leaves, a little bit of mint. To me, there's a bit of the oaks, definitely the vanilla, a bit of black pepper, but there's also a sort of green aspect, maybe a little bit stemmy, that comes from potentially a little bit of full harvest, but that's a different story. And last year, you could see I chew the wine. I make sure that I get wine all around my teeth, my gums, my tongue, and even though I spit, I always keep maybe 0.5% that I tend to swallow a little bit, just to get that elongation, just to have the flavor profile coming into my throat. I wouldn't do that at 8 o'clock in the morning, but what I'm trying to say is that will give you always a bit more precision on the legs and the flavor profile that really comes from the throat. If you just take the wine and spit it, you might actually find the wines shorter than it actually is, and therefore again in terms of the conception of the wine and its quality, you might be a little bit mistaken by the shortness of the expression. So coming back to the structure, the deciphering of the structure, I always use the word data. And why? Because D for dry or off dry or sweet. This is dry. A for acidity. So where the acidity is. So the Master Somm exam is very restricted on the wording, with medium minus, medium plus, and so on and so forth. The acidity here is medium to medium plus. You have to choose one. So I would say medium to be fairly honest with you. Then the T for tannin. Obviously for white wine it won't really work, but for red wine it's there. So don't forget to mention it. The tannins. How are the tannins? Well, they're definitely alive. They're very well integrated. They're slightly young. You have that beautiful kind of frame still to that structure, and again they have that grainy character that also deliver a little bit of profile. Again, the flavor profile, again a bit more vanilla and cinnamon and maybe a bit cloves comes on to the fore due to this. And the last of the letters is A for alcohol. Where is that wine stands when it comes to alcohol? To me, again, it's probably a medium plus, because you've got that little hit of alcohol, especially because it comes from there. And that's what I was trying to explain earlier on. You have definitely that sensation of ripeness, a solar vintage, and a wine that has taken that sort of sunlight to the fore. Again, the winemaker has managed that in a way that there is so much lush ripeness, beautiful construction, and sort of food power in the mid palate. So the mid palate, what is the mid palate? It's basically how with your expression and your experience, what's the weight of that glass of wine, that drops of wine that you have on your tongue. And here for me, again, the weight is quite intense. You have got a beautiful, structured, but again quite weighty definitely coming from the ripeness of the fruit. You have, again, a wine that is really kind of well built, very well knitted, with all components put together in a way that, I use the word aristocratic, you definitely have an aristocratic aspect to that wine. Not just because the grape variety, potential grape variety, but also the way the vintage and the winemaker has managed to put all those elements together in order to deliver that glass of wine in that bottle of wine. Always finish by finish. So, of course, on the Master Sommelier exam, they will ask you to deliver the same profile aromatically. What do you find on the nose, but also what will you find on the palate? So you should say, well, at least the same characters that on the nose, unless the one is unbalanced, and find some more. And here there is definitely more, with a touch of smoke, touch of earthiness, sort of wet floor, maybe plow off. Again, that sort of sappy tannins coming through, make you salivate. Definitely a bit of bitter chocolate, I would say. And then the red fruit coming also a bit more all of a sudden on the mid palate, with that sort of juicy, probably more on the sherry, stone fruit character, which to me, again, that red fruit coming on the palate compared to the black fruit on the nose would say that potentially it's not a single grape variety, but maybe a blend. And so finish by finish. Always finish by finish. So how long is that wine? Medium plus, medium minus, and so on and so forth. So that's definitely a medium plus length. The wines elongates, again, on that sort of sappiness and a little bit of verbal character. And then you go through your pre-conclusion and your conclusion. Obviously, I know what the wine is, so it's a bit easier for me as today. So pre-conclusion as, where would you put it in the world? The northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. We don't use anymore all world. It's more about this hemisphere, especially because nowadays with global warming, this element of new world, old world is completely obsolete. It's more about how the winemaker, again, has managed to control the heat and, to a certain extent, potentially even more the drought. As we know, some regions are much more affected than others, vintages are more affected than others, and leaf control and so on and so forth. And then you finish with your conclusion. So your pre-conclusion should state at least 1, 2, even 3 grape variety, a vintage with a gap, so from 2015 to 2020, and obviously that will give you an idea of where the wine position itself, especially if you think that, for example, aging process for Brunelos or for Chianti Classicos or for Barbarescos will come to the fore at this stage. Again, your knowledge here is important as to stage the wine quality and what it could be. And eventually you go into your conclusion where you actually define what the wine is. So European, France, cool climate, blend of grape variety, in that case is Merlot and Cabernet Franc. It's left bank, it's Bordeaux, and it's 2020 vintage. So there's few things there to be remembered and to work on is the plethora of vocabulary that you can use and that you will need to develop according to the wines, and then do not complicate it too much. No point. What is really important is that you also have that time frame. You will always have more to say on red wine than on white wine. So given you 6 minutes plus, because it's 25 minutes exam for 6 wines, you should be a bit more. You should have started the red wine when the examiner tells you're halfway, because as I said, red have always much more to give and to be talked about in order to really tick all those boxes, in order to grasp all those points for you to pass the exam, and more importantly to find that confidence that what you're talking about is actually what is in the glass. Because very often the danger is that you put flavors in that glass that doesn't exist, and that's the trick, because your mind plays trick with you, but also because you're trying to be too clever. Often is the case. You just don't let the wine talk. You listen to something that is actually more your brain than actually the wine. With experience, I have to admit that every time I drink wine nowadays with friends, when I drink, it's always blind. It's not to challenge yourself, it's also because you drink the wine and not the label. And that's something that you need to get used to, and try to have always 3 or 4 bottles of wine at home that you can play with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your flatmate on the on. Oh, what's this? Even though on the back of your mind you could say that you have 2 whites and 2 reds and you know what they are, it's listen to the wine, test the wine, don't listen to your brain, because it's where masters are made, is that capacity to actually go through one by one the element that glass is giving to you. Sometimes the temperature can be wrong, sometimes the wine can be slightly open for too long. You can have sometimes some wines that are a little bit out of your expectations. They can be really high quality, they can be medium quality. The Master Sommelier's exam, usually the wines are tasted thoroughly, so they always have really good quality. But I was involved in a competition not long ago, and one of the challenges, of course it's a competition, not the master, but the wine to me was completely off. And it was very difficult to be able to talk about something that I found undrinkable and I would never buy and put on my wine list. So with that exam, you also know that the wines are rather classics. It's not too esoteric, even though it's vast enough, to be able to decipher between a Zinfandel from Lodi to sometimes a Primitivo de Salentino, the Salento rather, or sometimes an Albarino and a Soave or a Gruner Veltliner can be something that you could actually work back and forth, or simply a Sauvignon Blanc from Puy-Fumé or Sancerre and a very, very aristocratic, well-made Sauvignon Blanc from Awatere River or Valley rather in New Zealand. So always work on those details, the smoky character, the reductive character, the oak obviously, the flavor profile that will give you that edge. And when I say this, I think all master sommeliers and all sommeliers that are looking to pass this exam creates a sort of map and a flavor profile map. And I really strongly believe that every single grape variety have a footprint, whatever that is, and that's for you to actually create that. So let's take an example. Syrah from the Northern Rhone. Usually it's smoky, it's bacon, it's black olive, it's a lot of red fruit or black fruit, and you can also have a very mushroomy character. So once you have deciphered one of those characters, obviously the trick is not putting that flavor profile in the glass, as I was telling you. But if you decipher one, then you know that you're on the right path and things should just come naturally. For me, for example, rubber, really, really burned rubber, like when you were at school as a kid trying to clean up the pencil, that rubber for me is Merlot. Always. But that's my personal view. So again, I've created that map that gives me that ability to, and I believe most master somms, to actually find elements in one glass of wine that will put them into that frame of that potentially could be this because of this and this and this and this. And the rest belongs to you.